This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. This episode is sponsored by C School, the online school for creativity training. If you'd like to unleash your creative potential and access a free Creativity Blueprint training series, then just head over to c.school. That's www.c.school for your free training series. In today's episode, I speak with Chris Brogan, and we talk about his role as a keynote speaker, artificial intelligence, and why you should sometimes hide the broccoli in the cake. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor. I'm delighted today to be joined by Chris Brogan. Chris provides strategy and skills for the modern business. He is the CEO of Owner Media Group, a sought-after keynote speaker, and the New York Times best-selling author of 9 books. His latest is Find Your Writing Voice, where he teaches how to distill your unique writing voice for any of your projects, from sending an email to blogging to writing your own book. Chris is also a much-in-demand keynote speaker and has spoken for or consulted with some of the biggest brands in the world, including Disney, Coke, Google, GM, and Microsoft. It's my great pleasure to have Chris join us today. So welcome, Chris.
My utter pleasure to be on here. Thanks for having me.
So share with the world what's going on in your world just now. What's happening?
Oh, what's happening? I'm in the process of writing my 10th book. And, at this point, it's a disease. It's not really that it's, necessarily for anyone else besides me having to keep making books come out of my body. But it's I'm finding it's an interesting time in the world. I think that what's going on in our whole larger universe is that we are at a spot where a lot of technology is kind of rushed past us. And I think that it's my job to help story tell us into understanding how to use these tools to make better human relationships.
I think the first time I heard about your work was through Trust Agents, the book you co-wrote with Gillian Smith. And I was thinking the other day, I thought, would now be a perfect time to write the follow-up for that book? Because it just feels like trust, that word trust. And obviously there's new technology like blockchain and other things now that are kind of solving some of those problems. But it feels like trust is, in some ways, has never been at a lower point with certain brands.
James, I feel like you maybe have a bug in my computer.
I'm following you.
Will be the spiritual sequel. And I reached out to Julian Smith. I said, hey, I think I'm going to write a kind of spiritual sequel to this book. And he's busy being a grown-up now. He's a CEO of a big company now. But I said, I'm going to write kind of like the spiritual sequel to this book because of exactly, as you say, blockchain and artificial intelligence and chatbots. And how does this all work so that we treat people like people instead of, awfully. And I have every belief that we're going to be in a good spot with this.
And as I was kind of looking through the book the other day and just seeing all my marginalia on the book. And the thing that obviously it was of its time, the way the book was written, but in terms of like the principles, the key, things in terms of, building your own tribe in that way, but also this just idea that kind of make your own way. It was a kind of a strong kind of part about that as well. Are you sensing, when you say the spiritual follow-up to the book, are there things that you sense that are very, very different today than, obviously apart from the technology piece, but are there bigger social things that are different today than when you first wrote the first Trust Agents?
It's a grand and very important question. And I think that, Julian and I we wrote one other book together called The Impact Equation a few years after Trust Agents for a different publisher. And we said, in Trust Agents, boy, if you get to this part really quick and you start using some of these tools to jump some gates, like it wasn't about the tools, it was about the idea that you could go past somebody, you could have a great win. And then 3 years later, we write this other book and we say, well, I don't think that many of you took us up on that. Now it's really noisy. So here's how to get through in this noisy world. Well, I think now, another 7 years on from that book and another it'll be 9 years. I think when this book comes out, it'll be 9 years since Trust Agents, almost a perfect decade. What's changed dramatically is that people just have utterly misunderstood why they're using these tools. They've been trained by quite a weird variety of people on how various technologies might help them, but that it's rarely the right choice. And I mean, we've stressed and stressed and stressed all as often as we can that it's not about a specific tool. The book wasn't about Twitter. It wasn't about, Facebook or otherwise. It was just about here's how you're going to build a business relationship. And in that process, it's a realization that no matter which tools you choose to use, you've got to reach people where they are. You have to, connect and serve them. You have to give them information that's useful to them, and you have to make them the hero, and you sort of be the host of the journey, the sort of alongside person. And I think that what has changed is we have really kind of sunk into a certain level of narcissism, where we're thinking if only people would love me more, then we'd have a better experience. And my opinion is that if only we could serve people better, they'd love us more.
So I've kind of got to know your work a little bit more through your speaking. I mean, obviously, I first learned about you through the book, and you've written many books since then as well. But your name keeps coming up all the time, more for the speaking, the keynote speaking, than anything else. I'm intrigued. When did the speaking part of Chris Brogan start? Not just speaking as in when you're 3 years old, but the speaking on stages. When did that begin for you? And was that quite a natural transition for you to go up there and speak in front of audiences?
So it's I feel like one of those stories that could go so far back, even though, not literally when did you learn to speak, but I was, when I tell people I'm an introvert, first, they don't agree. They don't believe me. They say, no, you're clearly an extrovert. But one secret I can tell you about all introverts is that the ones of us who are good at a stage, we're good at the stage because then we don't actually have to have one-on-one conversations.
Yeah.
We don't have to be, at the mercy of something private that makes us uncomfortable or pushes us to the corner. It's our stage. Yeah. And so I was a performer of some kind for a good majority of my life. I told really bad jokes at a daycare Christmas pageant. I was in a few different plays, a few different times where I wiped all my makeup off because I had this belief that only girls should wear makeup. So what they had was like 5 people that looked like normal humans and one kid who looked like he was going to faint because under the lights I just was like white as a sheet. So that's my underpinnings. When I first spoke professionally, meaning someone said they'd pay me, I backed into it like you do all things. And this really wonderful lady named Christine Perquette, who was running a PR company at the time, she's a Massachusetts area person like myself. She said, hey, Constant Contact, the email people, have me coming in to speak about all these social tools. You should come. And I said, okay. And then she goes, oh, and I have a budget of $1,000. Will that be okay? And I was like, money? Yes, that'll be great. And I didn't. That was the first time I got paid. And then shortly after, I raised my rates to $2,500 because I felt cheeky. And then it was in a hallway in, I think, 2008 in South by Southwest in Texas that Guy Kawasaki says to me, hey, I recommended you to speak with me at this event at a very big merger. So Thomson and Reuters were merging. You should come and speak. He said, make sure you ask him for a lot of money. And I leaned in really embarrassed. And I was like, Guy, how much should I ask for? I charge $2,500. He says, ask for $25,000. And I was like, oh. And so I said, okay. And I went and I did the phone call, and there's like 25 people on their side of the phone call, and it's just me on mine. And they say, what's your fee? And I said, $25,000. Now I said it like I'd been saying it every day for 5 years. But I had practiced almost an hour just saying the word as smoothly as I could. When there was a pause on the other end, and what I thought probably was like a 41-minute pause. It was probably like 6 seconds. They said, would you take 20? I played it very cool. And I said, yes, just as the TY left his mouth. Like, would you take 20? Yes. 20 is good. Yeah, I can work with 20. And that's how I made a lot of money keynoting. And then shortly after all that, Trust Agents comes out. It's a New York Times bestseller, and then 4 other bestsellers. Then I felt like I could charge $22,000 a speech and never looked back. And just to kind of cap that off, James, because it's not really about the money, but that's how I became a pro speaker. That rate dropped for a few reasons over the last handful of years, partly because, the market got a little lighter on this sort of thing. My topics were just a little less interesting to people, or so they felt. And, I hadn't had another best-selling book. I'd written lots of books, but none of them hit the way Trust Agents did. And so I just wasn't as sexy as I used to be. So now my rate's down lower. But it's kind of fun because, that is a part of my business. And I flirt back and forth with if I want that to be a big chunk of my business because, speaking, you get to push ideas out in front of people, but it's not the same as really getting your hands dirty and messing with some company and trying to make it better. But I guess I need to sort of do a mix.
And I think I was recently talking at the National Speakers Association, their convention. I think Christopher Penn, who you do a lot of stuff with, was also speaking on that one. Unfortunately, he was speaking the day after I didn't get a chance to hear him speak on stage. But I was actually talking about this idea that, for thought leaders and authorities, now it used to be authority coming from the author, the book was you were considered authority if you wrote a book. But it feels like we're moving to a time where we're moving from a place where it's not just about being the sage on the stage is not good enough. You also need to be the guide on the side. And I think one of the things I really like about your what you do is your books, I know you do coaching, you do other things as well, and also I would say your podcast as part of this is the guide on the side piece, but you also complement it with the sage on the stage part, and it seems to be you're very comfortable in both of those places, even as an introvert.
Yes. So one very absolutely not secret is that when Julian and I wrote Trust Agents, we were also kind of paying homage to a book we both loved called The Trusted Advisor by Charlie Green and David Maister. And the book, The Trusted Advisor, was how to get more consulting type opportunities and things like that. And I had not been much of a consultant prior to doing the work I was doing. I just kind of started being a consultant, and I didn't know most of what real consultants did. I just did what I did. So we stole as heavily as we could from Green and Maister, and we made them come to speeches with us, and we showed how much we loved them. And even when we wrote the impact equation, we printed Charles Green and David Maister's trust equation in it. So, I mean, we ripped off like the very formula of how do you be trusted. And when I say ripped off, I mean, they let us do it. But
you, in the same way that a music artist is heavily influenced by, I can hear, I can hear Miles Davis in that. I can hear Oscar Peterson. I can hear Jimi Hendrix in that. So you sense that it has a heritage. It comes from a place. But
but we were worse. We were Vanilla Ice stealing under pressure. That's what we were, because we just said, "Look, Charlie, we're putting this in our book, okay?" And but to your point, Sage on the stage and all that. Julian likes to speak for sort of the sport. I like to speak because it's really as close as I'll ever be to being in a rock band. And I think that what we both most like to do, though, is serve. And how do we help people grow in some way? Julian went off to run his own company. But the way I do it still is I weasel my way into any big company that'll have me if I think I can help them serve their customers better. And so I'm always looking along these various parts of customer experience going, oh, here's something we can mess with. And that's, such a pleasure to me. And so I think that the real opportunity, the real thing about the book or not and authority or not is I never do that. What I really do is I try to give all of my best ideas away for free. I try to put my very best work in front of people as often as I can, whereas other people try to hide it. They think it's proprietary, but I think ideas are really stupid to make proprietary. And instead, it's that part. It's the implementation, the execution, the ramp. I mean, I have someone hiring me, I guess as soon as I send the proposal back. And what he really wants is he wants me to help guide part of their media efforts for the next little while. And I guess I'm going to act as sort of like a showrunner on a TV show. And I love it because to me, that's going to be something I've not done. They get to be the hero, but I get to help them shine up their message that way. And they get to represent their industry. And to me, all of those pieces stuck together, I mean, that's what a speaker can do with or without a book, as long as you've demonstrated in some way how you're going to do that. And then they just say, now do it for me the way you said in that story or that blog or that video.
And in your latest book, you talk about finding your writing voice. I'm wondering also in the speaking side, when you were kind of moving into that space, was it easy to find your speaking voice, that voice that you thought was authentically you, where you could be different from any other speaker that was out there? You had your own perspective. Was an easier or harder process than being the author and finding your writing voice?
Oh, James, I am unfortunately somewhat known for being unteachable in the world of speaking. Dr. Nick Morgan, who is a very good professional speaking coach, really one of the world's best. Dr. Nick Morgan devoted part of a chapter of a book to me, saying, I couldn't really, Chris Brogan. I spent $6,000 trying to learn from Dr. Morgan, and I got everything he said, and I never wanted a refund because everything he said was great. I couldn't do what he wanted me to do. It was just so foul and so afar from what I would do. And by the way, it works vividly well for all of his clients, and his sort of models and methods work great for his clients. I've watched people get amazing standing ovations.
What was it? What was it that didn't click with you, and you just felt, listen, I think I have a core of something here. I need to just improve upon it. But was there something that you didn't like, maybe about the?
Oh, why did I go to him?
No, not so much. Why did you go to him? But were there things that you sensed that, okay, this is what a speaker should do, but it just doesn't work for me?
Yes. So, being Irish, French, and Scottish heritage, I have my own free built-in self-loathing. Also, formerly Catholic. So, I have all the building blocks of self-loathing. And so I was pretty sure that, like, I am very much in all the things I do. I very much am unpolished. I sort of look like I'm winging it. I look like I shouldn't be there. And, sometimes I'll have a suit on, but still I look like that guy that they made wear a suit. Like, it might not even have been his suit before. And I thought, well, I should probably be a little more of a grown up about this. I'm going to go, pay for Dr. Nick Morgan and his wife, Nikki, and they'll like make me smarter or something. They'll have this model that I can then replicate all of my speeches like everyone else seems to do. And I'll repeat it and I'll practice it and all these sorts of things. I do none of that. I make every speech brand new. There might be elements of it from some other speech, but it's always custom. It's always super unique, and it's an idiot move. Like Jerry Seinfeld said, the comedian, he said to Amy Schumer, "I can never understand the arrogance of all you young comics who think you have to make new stuff all the time. People want to see your best stuff, not your new stuff. They want to know what's the best, and they want to like bask in that experience." And I just can't agree. And I think he's probably right. I think he should play the hits, but it's just not my style. So, Dr. Morgan, I mean, he would do great at NSA. I haven't even ever been to NSA. They don't like me.
You're not the traditional kind of, and I'm actually not a member. So I was kind of astounded when they called me to ask me to speak at that one. But, I'm probably a subscriber to the Groucho Marx thing of anyone that would have me as a member.
Yes.
I shouldn't be a member of. So I tend not to be a joiner of things. I love what I love about those organizations though, when they really shine is their way, and I see people like Chris Guillebeau do this beautifully as well, when you bring a community together. I think that's the bit that I think is really good. And I think guys like James Schramko, for example, in Australia, who can build a community around what they're doing. I think there's a huge value in that.
Right.
That's the bit I find interesting.
Sure.
So I'm wondering now you're kind of moving into your 10th book. What maybe key lessons did you learn from writing these previous books that you're going to try and bring forward into this book? Or is it going to be a sheet of white paper again? Start from scratch? Are there things that you maybe want to take forward and take into this new book?
I just got done telling you how like a bad speaker I am. I'm an awful author, and I'll tell you why. And this book, there is a difference, so I'll get to that too. The first 9 books I ever wrote, I started at the table of contents. I always started the table of contents, and then I start on page 1, chapter 1, and then I read all the way to the end. And sometimes I edit a little, most times I don't, but I write from page 1 to the last page, never out of order, always, figure it out, then go, figure it out, then go. That's not how people write books, James. It's the wrong way to write a book. But that's how I've done it, all of my books. And on this 10th book, number one, I'm a little 2 years overdue because I keep changing what I want to write about. It just hasn't felt right, and now it does. And then number 2, I just haven't been able to do that this time. I've just my head is a little bit more willy-nilly. So I'm using this really cool writing app that just came out called Spear. It's like Shakespeare, Speare. So just the weapon with an E at the end. And it lets you write sort of little blocks at a time and then drag them around however you want. Like what they promised in Scrivener, but it works better. Works way better. And it's a web app right now, and you can use it on anything. And I like the company. I'm going to try my damnedest to work with the company because I like it so much. But in the book writing process, what it's allowing me to do is I'm just blurting out things that I think are really important, and I'm going to glue them all together a little bit at a time. Now, this might not work, because I've written 9 books the other way. Like, I have this awful feeling I'm creating a junk drawer, and not a book. And so I'll tell you what I think is different in the landscape. People aren't reading. The United States Bureau of Labor and Statistics said that people read an average of 19 minutes a day, all across everything: text, email, Facebook, and your stupid book. Well, we always put books in the we'll get to it pile, and it never happens unless we're accidentally on an airplane or something. It's just not the mode anymore.
I have the Scottish guilt trip when I look at the books in my library that I haven't read yet.
Yes.
So part of me thinks that's an opportunity, and I think I'm going to take a time and I'm going to read those books. But the other part of me has the guilt, the guilt feeling.
Yes, and that's the thing is, and I'll say this. I said it from the stage 2 days ago. I said, we all have that folder on our desk full of things that we say we're going to actually get to, like our free ebooks that we downloaded from 800 websites. Mm-hmm. And I always tell people, just delete them. And I said, and then worse, why are you writing a free ebook? Because no one's going to read that either. So when I write a book, I sort of have the feeling that I have a strong responsibility to really drive home some value in that book and make it really consumable and make it bite-sized enough that people are going to be able to read it in their new crazy, always texting life. And I guess that's how I'm made a difference this time. My goal this time is to communicate it in such a way that people feel like they can munch on it in between. It's like tapas, basically. I've made tapas into a book.
But you've also had, obviously, I think you've got a new podcast series now as well. You've had 5 different podcasts. I'm guessing that the people that have listened to that podcast over the years, the downloads for that would have been much larger than copies of books sold.
Yes.
But is there something in terms of like leaving a legacy, passing something on, that you feel that the book is still, the preeminent form for that? You want to kind of return to that form?
Seth Godin says that books are souvenirs, and I've always liked that term. And also the other idea is that I think of books as software, and I think we treat them differently. When we're in a podcast mood, it's like crisps at the pub. We'll just grab a fistful, we'll eat them, we won't think much about it. But a book is supposed to be a nice meal somewhere. And, then we might think about what else they have on the menu and, is everyone going to be okay? That sort of thing. And so I think there's a responsibility to write a book sometimes. I just think that, especially as the person, everyone thinks that the publishing company markets books, but not unless your name is Stephen King or, Tom Clancy or someone. And I think that instead, if I'm the appointed marketer, then it's my job to extend the flavor of that book through speeches, videos, podcasts, blog posts, etc., tweets, so that I can get people to come and play, because they'll go, oh, I do need that material. And I think it's the hardest thing in the world, James. I think creativity, on one side we're always talking about creativity, about how hard it is to be creative, but how hard is it to be to consume a creative? I mean, no one wants it anymore. They want entertainment. And so your information has to be as good as Black Mirror. Yeah, and that's pretty hard.
Yeah, I go to gigs all the time, and musicians. I was at one last week, and there wasn't that many people in the audience. I was in Washington D.C., so I was at this gig, and it was a jazz gig, and it was actually some of the guys who play in some of the military bands around D.C., and they were amazing musicians. But there was hardly anyone near. It was almost that the audience outnumbered the musicians. And my friend was sitting there saying, the difficulty is that, there's another gig across the road with another band. And I said, no. You're not competing with that. You're competing with a $200 million movie or that's on Netflix, that's just come on Netflix. That's we're in a completely different time. And that sense of, obviously in the event space, they talk a lot more about this now, about this sense of experience. Almost like context over content sometimes. I think that's becoming a bigger thing, but I do wonder if it will, over time, it'll go back the other way. And people will, they'll have had, the experience thing all the time. It feels too light, too bubbly, and whether they want to get their teeth back into something. And that's maybe being optimistic. But
it's hard to know. That one's hard to know, James. And I feel, with all my soul, I feel that's a strong possibility, but I don't want to bet on it now. I feel that's like trying to be a swing band. If you were a swing band right now, you would be so avant-garde because no one's doing that right now. And, it got so popular in the very late 90s that, maybe you'd start the next wave, but it just seems like such an outlier opportunity. So I think, I will cater to the little bite-sized people, but I guess what I've always tried to do is I make it, my storyline about this is I like to try to hide the broccoli in the cake. Everyone knows that the best diet book in the world should be called "You Should Eat a Lot More Broccoli," but then no one's going to buy that. So I make my diet book called "The Cake Diet," and we eat broccoli cake. I think that's the trick. I mean, I think that's how we have to get people there is sneak it in. And so, as I think one of your philosophical heroes once said, just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Exactly. And a great movie as well. I watched it over the holidays. And what about in your life, in your creative journey, where you've got to now? Can you maybe tell us about maybe a key insight or a light bulb moment in your life when you went, oh, okay, this is maybe the direction I want to be going with my work, or actually maybe this is the direction I want to be going with my life, and I want to change up how I structure my businesses and what I do?
Okay. I might have to give you a few. One is Sir Richard Branson's book, Business Stripped Bare. So I've always run my businesses very different than other people. I've always run them kind of small, and I always believe in the sense of the pirate ship versus the Queen's fleet. And it wasn't until Branson's book where he was like, I'd rather all my companies have no more than 100 people. He goes, I think 100 is the best number for a company. So he goes, out of the 400 I have, 398 of them have only as many as 100 people, often fewer. He said the bank people fought him and the airline people fought him. But other than that, he got his way. And I think that's one big aha to me was like, that we can run small ships and that there's some value there. And then the other, like specific to my creativity, this isn't sexy, James, but it's true. So I guess we'll have to go with it. Tamsin Webster, she does the Red Thread, you know her?
Yeah, she's great. Yeah. I saw her just the other week. She was at that same event I was speaking at as well, and I love what she does with the Red Thread.
Yes. So I've learned from her. I spent money with her, and I learned a great deal, and it fit me better because, I mean, that's kind of her style is like, how do we make you more you? But one thing she said right before that gig, before she went on her own to do Red Thread, she was working with this company that wasn't as great a fit, but, it was good. And she said that if you don't apply the sort of highlighter or spotlight on the point you most want to make, people will sometimes infer the wrong point. So she used a great example. This slide deck for this investment firm was showing all of their staff and really highlighting the senior staff, all these nice gray-haired people. And the people that they were pitching really hard to try to invest in said they didn't want to go with this company. And they said, well, why? And they said, well, because we don't think you're going to understand what we're selling. And they go, what are you talking about? We have all this great experience. And they go, well, you have a lot of old people. And they said, oh. And, and that second slide to them looked like a bunch of old people, not like, 150 years of combined skill and talent. And so it wasn't like they changed the photo. Instead, they changed how they talked when they went to that photo in their presentation. And to me, that was the biggest light bulb I've had in a while, because I thought I am forevermore going to tell people where to put the highlighter in the notes.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, this is the note. And I verbally say that now, James, on stage, in my videos, even sometimes in my blogging. I say, put the highlighter right here because this is the point. And I say it like explicit like that. And that has changed my experience and how people receive what I offer.
Now, you use someone like, Tamsin, and you work with yourself in terms of the tuning of your keynotes and improving things as well. But I'm wondering, because we both have a real fascination in things like AI and machine learning. I've been starting to use AI in relation to kind of putting my keynotes through IBM Watson to get feedback. I'm wondering the technology that you've started using to make you a better speaker, and the skills, and also maybe on the business side of your speaking as well. Is there things that you've seen, whether it's in chatbots or we're talking about different cryptocurrencies as well? Are there things that you're kind of interested in and really applying to your speaking?
So all the things I'm interested in, I'm not interested in applying them to my speaking. As you said that, I was like, oh, what a really clever thing. But I don't, because my speeches change all the time, I don't know what Watson would make of me. I think he would just be like, you're a little bit schizophrenic, or are you sure this isn't 14 people?
I think you'd be pleasantly surprised.
Oh, maybe. I'd like it if you were complimentary. That's what I'd like. I'd like to pay a lot of money for a robot to be like, you're pretty good. But I'm very much interested in artificial intelligence. I interviewed this really great guy, Chris Benson, who is the chief scientist over at Honeywell. And it's a job that they made just for him. And I thought, well, that's pretty flattering. And we talked about some of where AI is going. I thought that was cool. I love Internet of Things. I love blockchain and chatbots. The one thing I'll say about chatbots is I think that most people are already implementing them are doing it horrendously. I think they're basically setting up answering machines when someone's expecting a warm connection, instead of having a resource a little further down the pipe that makes perfect sense why you'd go to it. If you're greeted at the front door with a robot, that's not a really great way to meet a new business. However, if you're greeted at the front door by a warm and caring person who says, "Can I get you, a soda pop?" and then we go down to a robot machine that's really good and it makes you exactly the James soda, then that might be a much more better use of that machine. So I think that to me, it's almost like comedians. Timing is everything, and I think that chatbots are great if people use them better.
Yeah, I guess we're moving into this time of something like Gary Kasparov would call it centaurs, or centaur marketing, where we're kind of going through the technical bit, like, oh, this is a bright, cool, shiny thing, to now actually bringing the humanistic part into it as well, and thinking through thinking through the psychology of people, really, as well, and what they want to experience. You talk about kind of customer journey as well. We mentioned a couple of resources here. Are there any online resources, tools, or apps that you're just really? I often think about, you're the person with your finger on the pulse when it comes to new technology as well. Is there something you're really enjoying playing with, experimenting with just now?
So I mentioned earlier, and I'll repeat it, that app Spear. And again, it's like Shakespeare. You just SPEARE.com. And I had the great pleasure of meeting the guy who created it, because he got so excited that I was excited that he flew to my next speaking event to meet me there. And I asked him if he had made any other software before, because this was pretty good. He said, maybe. And I said, well, anything I would know. And he said, maybe. And what'd you make? He said, Microsoft Excel. And I said, oh, pardon me, sir. Are you united? And he goes, me and 29 other people. It wasn't like I made Excel. I said, look, I'm never going to tell that story where I don't say you made Excel. I mean, because 29 other guys aren't here. So, quite successful. So Spear is my favorite thing that I've had in a long, long time. And I'm never very excited about software. I just think of it as, what tools would a pirate use to get the gold? And, that's a good one. The other is, if you're a Mac person, Ecamm Live. And one thing I like about this, I end up working with this company because I like them so much. Their founders, one lives in the town where I live, very small little town. It's, imagine, I don't know the Scottish equivalent. In Britain, it would be like, somewhere to the right of Nottingham in some village no one's heard of. And so he lives there, and Ecamm Live right now is set up to do Facebook Live on a Mac, and does way better than Facebook Live on Facebook itself, and drops it into YouTube and etc. But as looks like Zuckerberg may or may not support Facebook Live soon, who knows? We've kind of, the boys have put it together that they can also support YouTube Live pretty shortly, and maybe Vimeo Live, etc. So what I like about it is it's a relatively inexpensive video studio that allows you to set up really professional feeling video with like multiple cameras and that sort of thing. And one not very smart human named Chris could do it. So I think you could do it too. And I think that those kinds of tools are fun because they're ways to express and connect. The other thing I did is I made myself an Amazon Echo skill. So if you say ALEXA, play the Making the Brand flash briefing, it'll play my flash briefing on one of 30 million devices out in people's homes right now.
My wife was just very impressed when I managed to get the Amazon Echo to switch on our heated blanket in our bedroom. That she said that's the whole point. I don't want the machine to do anything else. If it can do that, it has a purpose. It has a purpose. And I'm a big supporter of Ecamm. I don't use Ecamm Live, but if you're listening to this podcast just now, we actually use the Ecamm Skype recorder, which is the most inexpensive, amazing little tool. And so I'm a big fan, so I'm definitely going to go and check that out as well. What about if you were to recommend one book to our listeners and also one record or album? What would those be?
Oh, I love that question. For book, one of the books that no one ever expects me to recommend is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. And it's a science fiction book. It was written a while back, and the movie was horrible. If you saw the movie, you are absolutely not allowed to say that you know what I'm talking about. But Ender's Game, and it is a great, great, great book because it teaches different perspectives. The biggest thing you can learn is that if you can learn how to mentally frame different than other people, you will succeed in much bigger ways. And that's the big lesson. For album, I'm so caught because I know you're like so musically apt, and so I have this feeling that everything I'll say will be too pedestrian. But
and you're in a great part of the world for me. I mean, obviously you have the Berkeley School of Music there in Massachusetts. Wonderful. So I know a couple of my friends have been involved in that business as well, and they're producing incredible musicians that are coming out of that place.
I was trying to think about and I have much more favorite bands than this and whatnot, but these are probably I love hard music usually, like heavy metal and stuff. And so if I was trying to think of, if I had to have one album on a desert island, what would I survive the longest on? And it would be Toxicity by System of a Down. LA band. Serge Tankian is an Armenian gentleman. I think the whole band's Armenian. The famous song on it's called Chop Suey. It's the one where they're singing about self-righteous suicide. But the thing I like about it, especially, and I know you like jazz and that sort of a thing, if you listen to things like the drums on Toxicity, it is a very atypical drum beat for a rock song to have, and the way they kind of make the guitar come in and all that, it just really sets off kind of movement is the only term I can say. And so it's one of those albums that is, as you first hear it, you hear really heavy metal type guitar sounds and you hear screaming and all that. And you're like, but if you listen for a bit, like I promise you'll say, wow, I really didn't realize how nuanced this could be.
Yeah, that's true. I'm going to listen to that next as well. And final question for you, Chris. I want you to imagine you woke up tomorrow morning, you have to start from scratch. So you've got all the tools of your trade, all the knowledge that you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you. You know no one. How would you restart? What would you do?
By the way, my new podcast is exactly that, because the people I'm trying to appeal to could care less that I'm, quote, Chris Brogan. I would throw up a website. I would throw up a newsletter right away. That was one of my biggest mistakes, is I did not have an email list sooner in my life. I regret that deeply. And then I would probably throw some kind of podcast or video. I mean, I would certainly get right back into being basically a media company so that I could reach the kinds of people I want to reach, because I think that the best way to do any of this is to, connect and serve by showing people you have information that'll help them make themselves successful.
And if people want to kind of reach out to you, if you want to learn about the podcast, I mean, I know you've got obviously the speaking, you have a kind of coaching part of what you do, and you have some lots of cool parts of your business as well. Where's the one place that they should go to find out about that?
It's probably easiest just go to chrisbrogan.com. I always recommend that if you want, grab my newsletter and then endure that for a few weeks. And if you like that, then you might like me. And if you don't like that, then you will certainly not like me.
Wonderful. Well, Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to seeing you speak on stage at some point soon as well. And I just want to thank you for all the great books you've brought out. And I'm really looking forward to reading this next one that's coming out as well.
It's been my utter pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.